For many people in a technical career, we tend to focus on our technical knowledge, and rightly so. But the further we advance in our careers, the more important our non technical skills become. The ability to articulate ideas, present project proposals, or interact with all organizational levels becomes critical. On today's podcast, we will be talking with someone who can help us understand the importance of these skills and how we can improve them. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm UTC President and CEO Rusty Williams, and thank you for joining us today on this edition of the UTC podcast that we call The Intersection. Now, we call it The Intersection because UTC and its members sit at the intersection of technology and the delivery of reliable and cost-effective utility services. Today, we have as our guest Mr. Anthony Vincent Bova. Anthony is the president of EdgeWork Method, where he helps technical and analytical professionals close the gap between expertise and influence. Anthony, it's great to have you with me today on the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Rusty, thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure and an honor.
We strive on the podcast to have different people as guests, different backgrounds, different areas of expertise, different experiences, and you fit that category, Mr. Bova. You're a little different. You know, your background and all is a little different from many of the guests that we have here. But I think the conversation people will understand that companies like yours play an integral role in helping people like us, the technical people, the utility people, and help our companies be more successful. So why don't you, as we set the table, why don't you give us just a little bit of background about yourself and how you got to where you are today?
Wow. Well, it certainly was not in corporate, right? I started off as a performer in the musical theater circuit way back in the 80s in New York City. And I call it my first love. I loved it, right? But in the mid 80s, now mind you, by that time, I had a lot of training in acting, dancing, singing, and all of that. A lot of training.
Mm-hmm.
But in the mid 80s, I met my acting mentor. His name is Eric Morris. Just spoke to him yesterday, actually. He's still teaching in Hollywood. And I was invited to his class, and when I went, my jaw dropped because everything he did had nothing to do with acting.
Oh.
Zero to do with acting. It had to do with how to identify blocks to the reason why you're acting and eliminate the blocks. And quickly, I became a protege of his work. By the early 90s, I was the only one sanctioned until this day to teach his system in New York. He's a very famous teacher in Hollywood, and he has 10 books out. But his first one I find is really interesting, which is called No Acting Please. And it's forwarded by his former student, not mine, his former student, Jack Nicholson. And
interesting.
Yeah. So long story short is that I started to teach his work, and before you knew it, there were business people coming into my class because sales were going up, relationships were stronger. There were promotional activity was happening. A lot of and I'm like, what's going on? And they said, well, because of this class and the work we're doing in this class, I was finally able to connect to my prospect and influence them in a very authentic way. And so that's what's been happening since I would say 5 years after I started teaching acting. Then it's been around 12 years now. I've been primarily within utilities. And that's been a very exciting journey for me because I'm learning about power and how it works and all of that. And so, what's interesting is that when in this industry, I find like, oh, no, I know what I do. I don't want to talk about it. Tell me more about substations,
It's interesting to me to hear you, make that transition, right? I think I can officially declare that you're the first person to come out of, the acting world,
Yeah.
and then be a guest on this Intersection podcast. So you can, for whatever that's worth, you can take that and hang it on the wall.
Hmm.
I'll send you a ribbon and you'll have it one day. But I like the idea. We're going to talk about it a couple of times while we're together here today. But there is a lot of similarities, right? In what you're trying to accomplish, what you were doing with your creative types, and what you're trying to do with the utility types. I know you've been helping us as an organization, and when I say us, I'm talking about the UTC group. I came in a couple of years ago, and it took a while to kind of assess, figure out where we were, and we kind of decided that we wanted to work on a couple of areas. One was how we worked together and communicated with each other and all that, and you've been helping us with that. And I appreciate what you do to help the staff and the organization. But as you made that transition from the creative world to the utility world, I mean, is it the same kinds of things you're talking about? Whether you're talking to actors or singers or engineers or technicians. When you think of the utility clients, I mean, what is it that you're helping them with?
Well, first of all, it's been a pleasure for me to work with UTC. You're doing a great job. You got a fabulous staff, and they're doing great work. A good measure of that was the last UTC conference. It was wonderful. So I just wanted to say that.
I appreciate
Uh,
it.
Absolutely. Regarding your question and where you're going, here's the thing that a lot of people don't get. Um, the the obstacles from making a real authentic statement are very similar and this or the same between engineers, let's say, technical professionals, and actors. For example, actors get very cerebral, so does tech people, right? They have nerves, tension. They're on both sides. There's a lot of taught behavior in which I'll call them bad habits that are
Right.
both sides. And here's the thing, the perfectionist on both sides.
Well, be careful now. Be careful. You're talking to one of those.
Yeah. I know. And when the perfectionist is very strong, and for the actors, like I got to get this in one take, and that tightens them up. It's like holding the racket too tight in tennis, right? Or the golf club. So these are the same, or sometimes it's just in the DNA. It's just in the DNA on some of the cultural things that will happen. For example, uh, there's one actor. He came from Brooklyn, and he was a street guy kind of thing, right? And
Hmm.
everything he did, he would talk like a mobster kind of thing, right? Now, after a while, that doesn't work
Right.
if you want to go beyond that. So there are different taught behaviors that sometimes hold you back. And so they are in both. And what I do is help identify and eliminate those obstacles.
Yeah, and for technical people, it's a conundrum almost of, the very thing that makes us a good technical person works against us in some of the areas that you're talking about, right? I want to know the minutia. If I'm going to be a good engineer, I'm going to be a good technician, I'm going to be a good software developer, whatever it is that I do.
Mm.
I really have to, understand and know the low level. But when we're talking about the ability to communicate, to connect, it is kind of what I don't know if you just said it. I know you and I have talked several times over the last few months, and you make that comment about connecting with the person or the group that you're talking to, right? So, it's almost you're working, against yourself. But you did a good job. You mentioned the annual conference a minute ago.
Mm.
We did have a good conference in Long Beach back in June, And we did some things a little differently, trying to help people to be able to connect with each other. And one of the things that you did at the big opening general session that we had, we had many of the delegates in, 500-ish people there. We had lunch and all that kind of stuff. But you had a few minutes to be in front of them and talk about this particular issue. So, why don't you describe that to people that maybe that weren't there, kind of what you did, but more importantly, why you did it that way?
Absolutely. Yeah, that was fun, wasn't it? We were on stage together for that. And but the first thing I did was I put up on the slide a study that says, quote, engineers and developers are 3 times more likely than other professionals to cite fear of negative judgment as a reason for avoiding conference networking. Now, I did that, unquote. I did that because I wanted them all to see it, because there was like a 500-ish right there, right? And for them to go, oh boy, that's probably me. Because
Or I'm not going to do that.
yeah, yeah.
Anthony, you can't make me.
Exactly. You can't make me. So what's that all about? When I talk to a lot of my clients, and when I'm doing inventory with some of them, and I say, well, tell me about that. You know what a lot of them say? They say, well, I'm an introvert. Well, that's not really, that might be a little bit of it, but if you're citing fear of judgment, that's not about being an introvert.
Right.
An, int-
That's
an,
right.
int- an introvert is when you get more energy from being more alone or with very few, and it's a different animal, right? So I'm like, well, what it's about is the focus on thyself. Will I get the details right? Will I be, if I don't, is my competitor, or if not a competitor, another colleague from another utility organization, I think he knows more than I do, or she than I do in this area, and then will I be called out? And there's a lot of that going on. A lot of that. Now, what am I aiming at? Is that it's all about me, my. Imagine this. You're on the stage and the spotlight is on you on stage. When you feel the spotlight is on you and you get all like nervous and everything, we call that spotitis, right?
There's a technical term for it, huh?
we kind of made it up, but yeah, you got spititis, like, and so and that causes tension, that causes fear, that causes doubt. Now, what's the enemy of tension? In other words, the antidote is to get involved outside of yourself. It's outer involvement. So what we did is that I talked a little bit about this, and then I call it the host exercise, where if you think about it, if you're having a barbecue or a networking event at work and you're hosting it, right? And because let's say you're prospecting and people come in, you're like, hi, how are you? What's your name? Let's get a name tag. Come in, get a drink. Where are you from? And you start and you become curious about that person, right? Or if they're with a bunch of people, you say, oh, tell me, introduce me. Welcome. There's this thing about welcome to my home. Let's break bread together kind of
Right.
feeling, right? That's a good thing. That's a good thing because you're not focusing on yourself. So the host exercise, I said, all right, this is the exercise. Everyone here at UTC did not produce this event. You did, right? You did. You're all the host. And they kind of looked at me like I had 7 heads. And I said, it's okay. I'll connect the dots. Don't worry. And what they did was I said, when I want you to stand up, you're going to walk 10, 15 feet, meet someone new, and as the host, and become curious about them. Ask them about, welcome them, and ask them about themselves. Something, and what was funny about that, and not funny, well, yeah, it was funny, was that you and I were standing there on stage while this was going on. And within minutes, there was like 500 people. They were all talking loud,
Hmm.
and there was this jovial kind of. There was some. I even felt there was levity in the room, which was really nice to for that to happen so quickly. So to go to this to put a period on this is that the enemy of tension, well, what is tension? Tension is a manifestation of unexpressed impulses. Tension are impulses unexpressed. The reason why that happens a lot is because of inward focus, focusing on thyself. And so, what you want to do to remedy that is not focus on yourself, get involved in focusing and in your on your audience, your prospect.
Yeah. So I know a lot of people don't believe it when I tell them that, I am introverted by nature. Um, again, stereotypes are stereotypes for a reason. They're not denigrating or other things. It's just observations and in some cases, reality. But I myself was that way, especially earlier in my career. I did
Mm.
to the idea of being forced into some sort of social situation like you were just describing. But, through the course of time, I was able just to kind of make myself do some things. And, you may not ever get completely comfortable with it, but you get to the point to where, you can do it and you see the value in it. And that's kind of the point here. And something that I make mention of many times when I'm speaking in front of UTC meetings to engineers and technicians and others is that that is one of the most important things you can do in being a part of UTC is meet people, build that network, understand who does what and who's the guy that's got a similar job to you or lady that's got a similar job to you in the next utility over and all of those things. So, but it takes some effort. It's like, dieting or exercising or learning a language or whatever, it just takes some effort on our part. But I'm still that way deep down in my soul.
Mhm.
I call myself a recovering engineer. I'm way deep down. I'd just soon go back to my room and, watch a football game on TV or something, right? But that's just, part of the professional world is we have to figure out a way to do that. So we talk about the technical people here and sort of those stereotypes and how you've helped, worked in this area. So how does that differ from you dealing with the creative types, the actors or the singers or the others? I mean, is it that much different in your mind, or is the core issues basically the same?
Core issues are the same. The core issues, as I was explaining earlier, the core issues are absolutely the same. Where it differs is that with actors, I go to a more extreme areas. Uh, one of my, here, I'll give you an example. One of my actors, he's actually doing, he's plays the role of Jesus Christ in the show The Chosen.
Hmm.
I believe that clip was shown. I'm in the documentary, so I talk about him freely. Um, and he has to go into this Christ-like, he has to see the world from a Christ-like state, right?
Right. Which is a challenge.
Well, what do you do with that,
Right.
right?
Right.
I think you could spend a life trying to do that, and I don't know who's going to get there, right?
Right.
But you try, right? And that's where yet another actor of mine played the role of Charles Manson.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and he had to see the world from a satanic point of view. Now, very, 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 very different. The process of getting to these very different places might be the same or similar in terms of the specific techniques. There are techniques that you use as an actor to elicit different sides of yourself, right? Now, I'll talk actor stuff just for a second because it does relate to the business. One of the big actor traps is when you got to play a real evil character is to ask the question, well, how do I act evil? How do I act evil? No, 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 no. It's how do I see the world from an evil place? How do I see the world from an evil state? What we call the point of view, the POV. And the same thing on the opposite. As it relates to business professionals, one thing I always say is you've got to see your audience as if they need what you're saying. They're in pain, and whatever you're going to tell them will ease the pain, will ease their pain, ease their journey. It'll help them find an answer, something. And if now here's the thing, do they need your information? I don't know. Maybe not, maybe so, but it's not relevant. What's relevant is that if you see your audience as if they need help, that by default you will engage because you're trying to help them,
Okay, interesting point of view.
as opposed to trying to just explain explain something, explain the technology, explain the process of something within technology. Excuse me. And so if you could see your audience as if they really are in pain and they need your help, there's even as I'm telling you right now, people can't see this because it's only audible. I'm coming forward
Right.
right now, and as I'm speaking, because I'm trying to help. That's the thing. And also, what that does is that it gets you out of focusing about yourself. It gets you out of feeling in spotitis. It gets you out of that whole thing of me, how am I feeling when the focus is on how do I help my audience?
Right. And still you've got to make that connection, right? Whether it's a one-on-one conversation, you're in a conference room, pitching a business case, or you're standing on the stage portraying, whomever. You've got to be able to make that connection. So talk to me about the idea of confidence just a little bit. I mean, a lot of times, engineers and other technical people are confident in what they do day in and day out, right? They design, they build, they repair, whatever. But when they get in these other areas or other situations, that confidence, a lot of times doesn't follow from situation to situation. So what do you do when you're talking and working with individuals or organizations to help them with their confidence, particularly in these kinds of settings we're talking about?
It's a great question, and I'm going to give you the thumbnail answer because it's really a loaded question and one to spend a lot of time on. But I look at it really in two different lanes. Do they have confidence related to what they're talking about, to their subject? And most of the people that I've worked with have quite a bit of knowledge. I haven't seen a shortage of talent in the industry. There's a lot of talent, a lot of knowledge. Now, the confidence is one thing, but the other lane I look at is that are you comfortable with yourself as a human being? People want to attach it only to presentations and da 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 like that, and when they're trying to deliver, are you comfortable with yourself? Now, let me explain the difference. When someone is very comfortable with themselves, they're really okay in their skin. When they're fumbling around, the audience sees someone, oh, he's trying to figure something out, right? The audience kind of mirrors the experience of the person on stage. So they're trying to figure it out. And even as the audience, he's like, oh yeah, he doesn't quite got that, I think, but he's trying to get it. However, when someone is like, oh my God, it's confidence, I'm failing, I look like a fool, da, 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 and they're having that kind of dialogue going on in their brain, right? As the audience, we start to cringe. We go, oh no, oh no, oh no. So one of the things I work on is how to be more comfortable with yourself. Now, one of the obstacles to being comfortable is what the quote I said earlier is the fear of judgment.
Hmm.
Now, how do you antidote the fear of judgment is really the question. And there's an exercise that I do a lot. It's called a disobligation workout. The disobligation workout, it's about disobligating yourself from having to be perfect. Now, I actually got a great story. I hope I have time for it, but I'm gonna try. Yeah, this is one of the stories that actually got me into from only actors into teaching business professionals. So it's a big one. Okay, I'll say it quick. It's great. Way back, even before I got my theater in Manhattan in Times Square, I was renting out a theater from a colleague. And this guy, he was a business guy, Wall Street, very, testosterone. Must have been maybe 29 or 30. A lot of, muscles and the whole,
Right.
a personality kind of thing going on in Wall Street. And he was in the class, and I see him in the just brooding, the sulking. Finally, I got him to go up, and I'm saying, "Hey, what's going on?" And now he's working on stage alone now. And he said, "Oh, I'm going to get a review. I have a review tomorrow, and I have a feeling my boss is going to ask me to get involved in this project." And I said, "Well, it sounds like a promotion might be coming." And he goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, if I accept it, I could probably retire somewhere to 3 to 5 years."
Oh, wow. Hmm.
Right, exactly. Somewhere between 33 and 35-ish, he could retire. Right. And I'm like, "Well, this is a really good thing. What's the problem?" He goes, I don't know what to say. I don't even know how to negotiate these numbers. I don't know what to do." And he was very, very stressed and locked up. So I said, "All right, let's do a disobligation workout." And I said, "This is how it goes." It goes, "You know what? Start with me saying, 'Anthony, I really don't care what you think about me. I don't care what you think about me.'" He goes, "But I do." I'm like, "Just start it, and then you'll start to, it'll catch on after a while."
Right.
I worked him for a good 20 minutes to a half hour. Finally, he even put his boss up there, and he was like, "I don't really care what you think about," and he was like there, right? And after the exercise, he said, "Thank you." I said, "How do you feel?" He goes, "Well, I feel lighter. I feel good." Anyway, class ended. The week came and went, and there was the next class. And he taps me on the shoulder before we're going into the theater. He goes, "Can I talk to you?" I said, "Sure." He goes, "Remember last week?" I'm like, "What happened?" He goes, "Yeah, it was last week we had the review." I'm like, "Yes, yes. How did it go?" He goes, "My boss offered me the job, the promotion." I'm like, "That's fantastic. What did you say?" And I'm sensing a pause in him. And he looked at me and he said, "Well, the exercise we did, the disobligation workout." I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "It rolled over into the next day." And I'm starting to say, "Oh, no, no, no." So what did you tell him? He goes, "I told him I wanted to be an actor and I really didn't need it." And I'm like, "What?" And he goes, "Yeah." I'm like, "What did he say?" He goes, "He offered me more money."
Well, I talk a lot, and recently with the staff, we had a conversation one day about, the difference in confidence and arrogance, right? And being
Mm,
confident is one thing, but going to the extreme to where you're really kind of cross the line into arrogance is something,
yeah.
completely different. We're getting kind of close to the end of our time here, Anthony, but so if you had to give somebody one piece of advice on how to better communicate or be more effective in communicating with someone you're working with, or it could be family member or in a social setting, whatever. But what's the one thing you tell people that, hey, if you could just do this, then that communications, interpersonal communications becomes better.
Well, it's the theme, I think, of today's podcast, where it's not about you. It's not about you. And I know it feels that way, but it's not. It's about how you can help someone. And if the focus could always be on how you can help someone, you're going to be okay. If you fumble around in helping someone, they'll forgive that. That's okay. But if the focus is really not on upselling, not on just explaining something, explaining technology and all of that, but on helping, that that will get you you'll get a lot of mileage out of that.
Yeah, to me, I call it relationships is what I call it.
Yeah.
Making that connection, trying to understand, trying to, establish an understanding. And before, I only had one real sales job in my career, right? I mean, again, I'm an engineer by training and way deep down in my soul. But the one sales job I had, the gentleman that offered me the job, I said, I'm not a salesperson. And he goes, I don't want you to sell anything.
Mm,
It's all about relationships. You talk to people, understand where they're at, what their needs are. To your point, you're trying to help them, right? Which is the point you were trying to make earlier. And I think when you do that, when you're able to make that connection and people feel like you really care to start with and you are trying to help, I think that goes a long way in a myriad of avenues, regardless of what you're doing in
absolutely.
life. Well, Anthony, I appreciate you being with us today. It's great to have someone like yourself on the podcast, but it's also great to have you working with our organization. And you and I have some real good conversations just one on one. I know a good bit. Others may be interested in reaching out to you. We'll stick some information, some contact information in the things we post, and they can reach out to you if they want to. But I do want to say thank you very much for what you do for UTC. But thanks for being with me here today.
Rusty, thank you for having me. And like I said, it's such a pleasure working with you and UTC. And I appreciate this time on your podcast.
Sure, absolutely. So, to the audience, we have to remember, and many of us are technical people, and we're always in the weeds, but we have to think about not only what we do, but how we do it and understand the impact on us personally and our careers. And the higher we go, the more challenging it becomes, but the more important it becomes as well. All right. Thanks to everyone for listening to the podcast today, this edition of The Intersection. I hope you'll subscribe to the podcast and be on the lookout for future monthly episodes. I look forward to seeing you soon.